At one time, what he was doing was he was alone in this pursuit. He's a tantric priest who also is trained as a choreographer, as well as he used to teach comparative religion at Santa Cruz College. His master, when he asked him what is a perfect fuel for a tantric practitioner, the master answered, grain. Well, didn't tell him anything more so. Possibly the master didn't know himself, for he heard this from his master and the whole lineage of masters. He was going to find out what is the superior grain. He tried all kind of different grains. He tried cooking it. He tried it as breads. He tried it as vodka. Vodka is not made out of grains. I think it's potatoes. But whiskey is. And eventually he discovered sprouting. And that started giving him a directive. Eventually he found that the most powerful food for regeneration and the libido and tantric energy was a combination of wheat, sprouted wheat, and wheatgrass. And he was a very monastic type of an individual. Instead of bothering with all the other food, that's all he eats. Sprouted wheat and wheatgrass. Now he's been doing that for over 60 years. No other food. Wheatgrass and sprouted wheat. He's got several dozen of other individuals who took notice of his tantric mastery and also his youthful nature, his agility, his beautiful dance form, his extremely sharp mind. And now there have been individuals who have 20 years have been eating likewise the same nutrition without any harm. Oh yes, gluten intolerance, yes. Well, celiac sprue diseases and all that has no effect on them. Mono diet has no effect. Does the stallion question eating same grass day in and out, same grain seeds day in and out? No. I'm not recommending that you should take up a singular approach like this. Daniel and his brothers of the Essene tradition asked the king if they could be forgiven the consumption of the king's meat. And they asked for 10 days to prove their truth. And the king allowed. And in 10 days, they were as fatty in nature and wiser than the astrologers and the magicians of the court. And the king took favor with them. What did they live on? Soaked legumes. The most spectacular example of longevity and following the spiritual path of blissology was the Essenes over 2,000 years ago, living in the desert. You can read the evolutionary history through mysticism of Edgar Cayce on the Essenes, a thick textbook. They did purification and found a way where you could on the internet Google up greening of the desert, put quote marks. You'll see a YouTube presentation how in a desert where nothing seems to be living, they established a very prolific culture for over 4,000 individuals. The Greeks and Romans thought so high of their intelligence, they were invited to the homes of royalty. They also were invited to do prophecy about the unfoldment of future. They usually fasted 40 days and longer. What was outstanding, not only were they noted for their cleanliness, but also for the abundance of crops which they shared with others, also for their extreme longevity. Historian Josephus noted that they lived 400%, 4 times longer than the average of the Northern Africa, Mediterranean region, Southern Europe. They lived on a simple diet, simple lifestyles, into happiness, respect of nature, respect of one another, eco-conscious. We might have to be looking at their directives in the near future. We have had previous year, not that rice is our ideal crop, but it's impacting everything. The weather has caused the rice crop to fail, and the weather has also, the high rains interfered with this year's farming. We've seen the corn crop high over 50% of it has been directed to methanol production and corn syrup, the elixir of death, as well as all the intoxicating liquors, instead of continuing to be a stock crop that created the foundation for so many civilizations. So that ability to, in the tradition like Happy Oasis talks about, going out and wildcrafting, learning to eat all the little things that are available in your vicinity. If you are detoxified, then you can live on that stuff. If you have done no detoxification, it'll bring on all kind of healing crisis when it becomes your main staff. So, having the most powerful foods in my book, Survival, I discussed the research that has been done with sprouted grains and fertility. Animals that have been sterile for up to 15 years, when placed on sprouted grains within 6 months, they were fertile. Even where they had been sterile all their lives, sprout grains have that strong regenerative capacity. There's a lot of good reason why they speak of sowing your wild oats. Well, sprouted wild oats will even take you further. Or why do they call wheat the staff of life? Having something to do with the staff, the erectile tissue. Do you realize that the grain was the food that fueled the Egyptian army under Cleopatra? But you know something about Egypt's floodplains where the grains were harvested? The beauty about floodplains is that you have every year, full spectrum of minerals being deposited into the soil. And the full spectrum of minerals is the foundation for genetic superiority. Pfeiffer Farms, biodynamic farms plus Pfeiffer Research they've taken our weak, wimpy wheat as well as the alfalfa with 6 to 15% protein content, and they mineralize the soil with earth dust as well as also with sea salt dilutions or sea salt dilution. Namely, they introduce full spectrum minerals. The consequence of all of this was, within one generation, namely the next crop, was the wheat was 45% protein. That is what the military, that was what Cleopatra's army